emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 601.PR2907, certificate number 19421. Hostile architecture.
Ken, you're a fancy lad.
Oh, I really am. I mean, look at these. Look at my lace cuffs.
Yeah. You showed up this morning in a Ichiro jersey, a Mariners V-neck t-shirt. Oh, no, it's just a t-shirt with your glasses in the neck.
It made it a V.
And
the glasses are showing a little cleavage.
A Mariners hat, too. And I was like, wow.
I'm going to the game
Are
after
you
this.
5 years old?
Are you doing cosplay?
Cute, though. It's cute.
I'm doing the cosplay you do when you go to a baseball game, John.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. Every there's this Mariners like sweater made by Ebbets Field that's so sexy.
I didn't know there was a Mariners sweater.
Yeah, and I really want it, but it's expensive. All that stuff is expensive. The sports stuff.
It's $400.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
But look at it.
I like it. I didn't know it was going to be the retro.
I know.
The retro Trident
I'm not going
look.
to buy a sweater that's like not retro look. My daughter would be so offended because she thinks that I dress like it's 1930, which she's not wrong.
This is so Roderick Core.
I know. But it's $400.
I didn't say it was Roderick's salary. I said it was Roderick Core.
So it's just,
look at that collar. It's great.
I know. It's just one more $400 thing that I look at on the internet and I'm like, huh, well, it's $400.
Well, the next time you don't buy an old GMC truck or something, you can be like, I just saved over $400. I can buy myself that sweater.
Yeah. I keep bidding on Fiat Spiders and I keep being outbid, but it doesn't stop me from bidding on them.
You're getting all the fun of bidding without having to pay a cent.
Yeah,
that's very smart.
Or without having to fly to the Upper Peninsula
to drive it back.
Drive this thing back through Canada. But as a fancy lad, right? I mean, I am
ready.
You're married to a lady who...
I'm going to speak for all fancy lads.
She has a low tolerance for misbehavior.
Correct.
She chastises me for misbehavior, and I don't do anything wrong.
I don't either.
Yeah, well, see?
I never get chastised. You're the one that's always acting up. But hypothetically, if I did, she would call me on it. You're right.
Let's say you were out in the world. You like to go to London and other places, far-flung places. What happens when you have to go pee and there's no place around?
Oh, what happens when I have to go pee?
You know, there used to be places to go to the bathroom that were throughout some parts of
that would be part of the
life.
Infrastructure of any city.
And they have taken a lot of those away. What do you do when you have to go, number one, and you're in the middle of some part of the city that you can't just go into a Starbucks or wandering around?
Maybe I should not confess this. Like I'll never be the Joe Rogan of the left.
Let's hear it.
But the other day I peed in a Washington State Ferry's parking lot.
You did?
Yeah.
And so you snuck behind a thing, or how did you?
Yeah,
you just went behind a pole?
Ducked. Well, I kind of, it kind of faced some woods and I ducked down. I was discreet. I was not worried about state troopers reading me the Public Indecency Act. In cities,
or a paparazzi with a huge lens on their camera, like Ken Jennings pees in the woods.
That's the like Princess Diana couldn't pee anywhere. It was like the worst thing about being famous.
Can you imagine?
I mean, in many Asian cities, especially if you're a kid, it's okay to just pee against the building, but
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. I mean, a pretty good life hack if you are like prosperity coded enough to get in the door is just that any hotel lobby,
Oh,
even not a nice hotel,
right.
particularly fancy hotel, will have a restroom off the lobby. And that's a meeting place where nobody cards or checks you. And you can pop in there.
As you breeze through the lobby, they don't go, sir.
Right. Because if you go in a Starbucks and try to make a beeline for the restroom, I mean, depending on what part of which town it's in, it might have a restroom code or it might have somebody yelling at you on the way in or out that you got to buy something first.
Right.
Hotels are not like, hey, you got to check into a room, then you can use the then you can use the lobby restroom. So I've given away my secret. But it's awful, right? That you need to pee and you can't pee.
It's hard. And the thing about that kind of urban architecture where there were public restrooms and, in European countries, you saw a lot of pissoirs, which were just sort of a surround that you went and it was, it was just kind of like what I grate in the ground. But it was the type of thing that it didn't require cleaning. It was out in the weather.
Right.
But it was a somewhat private place you could go pee. And then there was that whole era where cities were putting in self-cleaning, sort of porta potty sized public bathrooms
At the cost of a mere $78,000 per kiosk. You could buy
per week.
You could buy a self-cleaning restroom.
Yeah, that's right. And it all, a lot of this predates the time when every place locked its bathrooms. I kind of remember that era distinctly because people were going into bathrooms in Seattle to shoot up.
Well, that's what happened
Yeah.
to these public amenities is they didn't want people dying in them.
That's right.
Fair enough.
It's not as fun when you're working at a cafe to have somebody die in the one stall bathroom in the back of the cafe,
And
which I saw a couple of times.
but the sad corollary is places where the social contract is less frayed still have really great restrooms. There's this amazing Wim Wenders movie called Perfect Days. I think it's called Perfect Days, where the settings are all these super nice public restrooms that Tokyo put in for the delayed 2020 Olympics. There was going to be the movie, I think, was partly sponsored by some Japanese tourist council to promote this amazing infrastructure they put in for the Olympics. Then COVID pushed back the Olympics. And so there's just this movie for no reason about the public restrooms of Tokyo.
Wow.
But it's both a great movie and it really makes you envy a place where the social contract still allows for really nice, architecturally beautiful, individually designed restrooms in every park.
Well, the social contract is what we're going to be talking about today.
Oh boy, that sounds fun.
Everybody loves a social contract omnibus.
That's why we're the Joe Rogans of the left. Because
We're like, let's get down to brass tacks.
let's talk about your duty to the social contract.
Literally duty.
Oh,
Oh,
no. Is this whole thing going to be about restrooms?
That was a Ken Jennings type line.
When I hear hostile architecture, I think of like, the equivalent of those nails they put up so birds don't poop on things, except for people.
Yeah, that is what we think of as hostile architecture. The first ever hostile architecture.
Wait, we know who invented it?
Pretty much.
Jerry Hostel.
Jerry Hostel. No, the first sort of what you can kind of point to as like, this is an intentionally, this is a public installation that's meant to shape public behavior. Because in a way, all architecture is sort of part of a social engineering project.
Right.
You build stuff in order to guide human activity.
But for a while, maybe not. It was just the other way around. Human activity means we need to build a railway station here. It's not. Was there any thought the other way? Like, how do we want people to use this railway station? Well, if we make them go buy the kiosk, maybe they'll buy a paper.
Yeah, always. I think when you talk about architecture, you end up seeing the unseen hand. We never think, why is the door here instead of there? But somebody made the decision to put the door there.
But you know what I mean? Is it reactive to where Like people want the door there. The architect's saying, no, people should want the door over here.
Both things.
Okay.
Right? There's that's the thing about the trail across the campus at Columbia University when they are like, well, let's just pave it, this trail of convenience, as opposed to, well, we want people to sit this way. We want people to walk this way. We want people to...
My campus did not pave the human trails. It actually started a campaign designed to guilt students into not walking on the grass.
Is that right? They put spikes and little signs.
Let's just say Brigham Young is maybe not it's where you go for prescriptive, not descriptive architecture and urban design.
And that was totally unsuccessful, right? All those attempts to stop walking across the grass. We would
works. Certainly joke about it when we did it.
Yeah.
We were aware of the campaign, but it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
You're still going to walk where you need to go.
But the first hostile architecture was urine deflectors.
What?
In the late I guess you would say the late 18th century, there was a sense in London that the alleys all smelled like pee.
That sense is not just a sense. It's probably verifiable by science.
And also is not entirely untrue to this day.
The alleys were full of pee.
And you'll see these, now once you recognize them, they're kind of like in the corners, little brick sort of built up.
They're like on the diagonal slope so
that are meant to deflect your pee back at your own pants. So that when all the places that you might duck in to pee, there's some kind of thing, either brick or in some cases metal, but like shields that are precisely aimed so that if you pee here, it will splatter.
They're not accounting for my ninja-like urinary abilities.
That's the thing. It's very easy.
I would simply pee and duck. A series of Fremen-like deflections.
There aren't a ton of advantages to being a guy in this sense, except that you can pee in between urine deflectors, right? You can pick can pick your spot.
They can't deflect everywhere.
In fact,
London.
It's 80% of what being a guy is taking pleasure in peeing on the little bee. That's that right. Airports put
We're so dumb that they put a little... Is it a bee? I thought it was a fly.
Sometimes it's a bee. Sometimes it's a fly.
I don't like
it's
that.
A flower.
I would pee on a fly, John, but I would never pee on a bee.
Pee on a bee, but it has a little rhyme. You pee on a bee.
I guess, but they're valuable pollinators. I'm not like when I see a fly, I'm like, yeah, take that, you dirty little... But when I see a bee, I'm going to be like, oh, I'll pee somewhere else.
So to our listeners who have not used a urinal, or our listeners who have not used a urinal in a European airport, it is a thing.
Is this where we're going to find out that some woman somewhere actually listens to Omnibus? No, I'm sure it's like 60-40.
Omnibus listeners are for sure 60-40, because I think a lot of our listeners just lay in bed and listen to you and me and have a favorite and drift off to sleep.
And you're saying that's more likely to be women?
I mean,
men drift off to sleep,
but in the way I'm describing.
Okay, so
sexy voices of you, and
so that would be women and only women and gay men.
Yeah, or no, not necessarily. People that just like dulcet talk about urinals,
right?
Who are like, oh, what a way to relax.
Even our asexual, aromantic listeners are like, I'm not turned on by these guys, but I'm so glad they're talking about urine a lot.
But it was a fad, and I think maybe still is, to put a little enamel picture of a fly or some other thing.
A bee, apparently.
But weirdly, like off-center in what I always assume is the precise spot in the urinal that won't splatter.
Exactly.
And so if you just pee on the fly or pee on the bee, it's like where they want you to pee. Because again, social engineering, they could put the bee anywhere. They could put the bee where it does the most damage to your pants.
Wouldn't, unless it's a prankster. Unless Banksy is just painting bees on urinals now. Pee on the bee.
But only in banks.
That's right. That's how you take down capitalism.
Yeah.
Mural style. Pee on the bee sounds like a euphemism, right?
It's like a children's book.
You don't want your pee on the bee.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Like a business nomenclature.
I guess.
Listen, we're going to open the kimono and we're going to pee on the bee.
It could be business, but it could be anatomical too. It's like a euphemism, but I don't know what for.
Yeah. What's the acronym?
I don't know. I think they're flies.
Okay, flies, let's say.
Open your fly and let loose on the fly.
Yeah, open the fly and be a guy.
When you got to pee on the fly,
Yeah.
unzip your fly and aim at the fly. It's all themed.
Throughout the 19th century, you can see a lot of examples of architecture that's social engineering architecture, not necessarily like hostile, but using a lot of sort of panopticon style theories about how to maintain the social contract as urbanism increases, as people are living in sprawling urban factory kinds of neighborhoods. There are a lot of they're like ad hoc theories. You see different architecture expressing different ideas about how we're going to create neighborhoods in whatever the 19th century sense of a best practice was.
It does seem like this stuff often targets the poorer parts of town.
Well,
nobody's ever telling the rich how they should engineer their residences or streets.
I mean, the rich are building their own houses, so they're not. I
guess there's less subsidy.
Yeah, the poor neighborhoods are often being built by people that have a vested interest in the poor behaving a certain way.
So landlords,
and factories, and this was before like cities had big housing projects, and that is where the worm turns.
Robert Moses, are we going to blame Robert Moses?
Robert Moses definitely plays a little part in this, but what happened with a lot of the sort of early 20th century urban renewal projects. I mean, Robert Moses being part of that earlier era of here's how we're going to make cities into modern utopias. And then slightly later or slightly after him, the real business of let's clear out all the natural neighborhoods that have been built according to what would just be, like you're saying, the principles of, well, this is where people are, so let's build a thing.
What the residents actually...
Yeah.
How they lived.
Everybody crosses the river here, so this is where we build the bridge, and everybody wants to walk in here, so here's where we put the door. A lot of that got cleared out because, according to mid-20th century principles, it was dirty, it was fetid, it sort of sowed, not discontent, because those neighborhoods were fully functioning, but it sowed ignorance and a lack of modernity.
And some of it is like, well, this is an eyesore, so it can't be good.
Right.
The residents were not asked, how do you feel about the look of your neighborhood? And some might have liked it and some might have not.
And part of that, the sort of Western exceptionalism, like, well, these aren't the people going to college. And the reason they're not going to college is because they are eating fried food. Or they're not going to college because
the fire escapes on their building face that direction.
Yeah, and they spend all day out on the step, like playing the harmonica instead of whatever, going to these clean schools.
It is pretty funny now how urban architecture is all like, we got to create stoops where people can hang out. Like it's the exact opposite.
Oh my God, it's the exact opposite, right? And that's part of the human story too, as we'll see. What happened as a direct result of those early housing projects was a very measurable sense of alienation and ultimately a lack of care paid by the residents of these places to their built environment.
They were less invested because they didn't like it and hadn't chosen it.
Exactly. And this wasn't arguably how people were meant to live, and nobody was changing the light bulbs. And so
I just saw this play not long ago on a UK housing project where all the residences kind of faced inward. The idea was, and a lot of projects are like this, facing inward, and given the idea that it'll create a sense of neighborhood and belonging. But what it really did accidentally was just create a sense of isolation. These places didn't front onto any streets anymore.
Right.
So, from a conservative point of view, it became a hotbed of crime and the ability to hide from the police. I guess from a more progressive point of view, you're just isolating these people in a place where you don't have to look at them and they can run amok for themselves. All they did to fix it was just turn the houses around, put the doors on the other sides, and they basically fixed the neighborhood that had been broken for decades.
A lot of these theories get tested in UK council estates.
Yes.
Right? Because
that's exactly what this was.
because the council estates all got built according to a theory. It all was terrible. Then they tore them all down and built new ones.
And they're localized, right? Because it really is the council deciding, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were,
It would be more top down in a different country.
and that is sort of, the Chicago Housing Authority, right, started out as a, very progressive, very, with a real theme of integration. Like, and a lot of these were utopian, with the idea that they were going to uplift the poor, integrate neighborhoods.
Robert Moses was shocked in the 70s and 80s when he became a byword for bad anti-liberal planning.
But one of his most famous, an early hostile architecture was the way Robert Moses made bridges on the Long Island Expressway low, so buses couldn't get out there.
We don't want people of color going to the beach.
And this was really, and it still kind of is, really common in public transit. The reason there wasn't a train to Bellevue until just now was the city had to force Bellevue to accept a train.
And did you notice the train still doesn't go to the mall? Yeah. It goes to some inconvenient place further from downtown because the billionaire that owns the mall does not want the wrong kind of people.
Yeah, doesn't want people from South Center
loitering at the mall. They might not go to the Apple store.
And loitering is also a common theme. And this is the thing about urbanism.
Certainly a common theme in my life.
You do a bit of it. I do too.
Summer's here, John.
Oh, thank gosh.
There's barbecue. Do you worship Gosh?
Oh, thank goshness.
I've seen that little statue of Gosh you have there, and you're always burning incense to Gosh.
But you didn't think I was worshiping. You thought it was just like
I thought it was just a symbol,
kind of college fun that I have around here.
Yeah, but you actually you've prayed and asked Gosh into your heart.
I do, and I said, "Gosh, can it please be summer? Please, Gosh."
There's so many great things about summer.
Good gosh.
There's the barbecues, the trips.
Mm-hmm. There's dancing in the streets.
There's a lot of dancing in the streets, at least in movies.
Yeah.
Summer is busy. Like, it's supposed to be chill, but it's busy.
I'm so busy. I think it's going to be chill, but busy.
But you know what can ruin a chill summer?
A lot of things, it turns out.
Nope. For the purposes of this ad, just one thing.
Okay.
It's when you get your mobile bill.
Oh boy.
And it's super high.
Oh, I hate that.
And in summer is when some of those charges can rack up if you've got a bad plan because you're traveling.
Yep. Happens all the time, right?
You tell your kids, hey, don't make long, expensive phone calls while we're traveling, and they do it anyway. Well,
then the kids, what they're doing is they're sending memes. They're sending photos. They're making little vids. They're using it up.
And then you don't know until you get your wireless bill, and you go wow with your eyes,
with your Roger Rabbit eyes.
But there's a fix. There's a cure for Roger Rabbit eyes.
What is it?
Did you know that Mint Mobile has plans that start at $15 a month?
I did know that because we love Mint Mobile.
Because we've done this ad before.
Yeah, well, that and we both think it's a marvelous service.
I mean, I don't think I have had a lot of cell services. I've never had a $15 bill until Mint Mobile let us try out this plan. It was great. The coverage and the speed was exactly comparable to the stuff I was doing before, and I was just spending less money.
You got to keep your old phone number. You got to keep your old address book.
There was no data overages because everything was unlimited talk and text. There was high-speed data. They've got the largest 5G network in the nation. Just never surprises on the bill.
Well, summer's here and the time is right. So
for switching to Mint Mobile in the streets.
So what? So get to the point here. Tell us, how do we get onto this Mint Mobile gravy train?
Here's a deal that I'm going to offer just you, John, and anybody who's listening. But
okay.
Are you recording this right now?
Anybody listening over my shoulder? No.
So nobody else is hearing this, right?
No. This is just between you and me.
This is
and
good.
Gosh.
This is good because I'm about to reveal to you and Gosh alone.
Okay.
And to Gosh, a special deal. I'm going to offer you 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for just $15 a month.
That's $45 for a 3-month, 5 gigabyte plan.
That's a crazy introductory offer. Isn't that amazing?
That's phenomenal. And you're telling me that that's at mintmobile.com/omnibus?
This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get your summer savings and shop premium wireless plans by going to mintmobile.com/omnibus.
Upfront payment of $45 for a 3-month, 5 gigabyte plan required. equivalent to $15 a month.
Hey, we should, what if we read the disclaimer like in unison, weirdly, like we're chanting?
Okay, let's do that. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
That was great. I think people will remember the disclaimer now.
It's the first thing we've ever done like that.
It was weird.
Maybe it could be a whole thing. I think Gosh likes it. Look at the incense.
Gosh is smiling.
Urbanists, which is the term we use for contemporary thinkers around what makes a city healthy. Urbanists love loitering. They want us to just
we'd be so happy.
Hang out. Why aren't we all hanging out? And
for 100 years, it was like, if anybody's hanging out, civilization ends.
Why are you hanging out? You're just out here smoking cigarettes and singing doo-wop.
Get a job.
Get a job. So one of the problems of tearing down inner city neighborhoods, tearing down vibrant communities, African-American communities, Jewish communities that were organic and not really manageable in the sense
planned by City Hall.
Yeah, City Hall couldn't for sure get the cops in there if there was a problem. City Hall couldn't make sure that cholera didn't sweep through the neighborhood. And tearing them all down and building housing projects ended up, by the early 60s, there was a real, now national epidemic of crime. And crime...
They made it worse.
Yeah, crime was especially concentrated in the environments around public housing. And so the theorists directed their attention at why this would be. We've built these modern towers with all mod cons, or at least all poor people mod cons, and most of them are right in the center of the city. Why are they so quickly so decrepit?
You have to wonder if it was quick enough that people really had to ask, what did we do? What did we do wrong?
What did we do wrong?
Because I think the tendency among many people is to be like, boy, despite all we did for these people, look, you can't help these animals, the kind of racist, classist objection. But it happened so quickly. In this case, people did have to say, did we redesign this wrong, you guys?
And there were quite a few people who recognized right away that what they'd done was violate or destroy the social compact. It was maybe a time when the social contract was first, really being understood in this modern, contemporary, built environment sense. I mean, obviously the social compact had been part of philosophy back to the Enlightenment and long before, right? And it was, Kant, it was all he talked about. But thinking about the social compact as a thing that was like really sort of neighborhood based, it was pretty clear by the 60s that the work that had been done to build this utopia had actually broken the social compact in a multitude of ways. And there were sociologists that were identifying this as a major problem. Elizabeth Wood, Jane Jacobs, they influenced this idea that environmental design had, in some ways, because it had divorced people from a feeling that the territory belonged to them, it had created a security situation that nobody was monitoring. And so crime flourished because what had formerly been just the watchful eye of neighbors was no longer active. And in many cases, the built environment made it kind of very hard to see the corners, very hard to see the stoop, impossible even to open the windows and yell at the kids, which it turns out all along.
Crucial to making cities work.
Yeah, that's right.
If no one's yelling at kids playing stickball, is it even a city?
I mean, it finally vindicates my yelling at kids. That's been a major part of my whole adult life. And so this new theory of crime prevention through environmental design was advanced first by a criminologist by the name of Ray Jeffrey, and then most famously by an architect by the name of Oscar Newman. And it's funny because Jeffrey really, he coined the term and he established the concept, but Jeffrey's philosophy was very encompassing. It was a very broad idea, not just of environmental design, but also it involved the psychology of communities, and it was obviously harder to implement. It was more a critique of modern society, whereas Oscar Newman had it was much more a prescriptive, like, here's what we can do to, in the future, design our environmental or built environments in order to reintroduce these kind of core elements of the social compact that was actually keeping us safe.
He's less of a theorist. He's more of an engineer. He's got action items.
He had five kind of like principles of environmental design.
Lay them on me.
He wanted to reinforce the territoriality of the home. We natively believe our home is a sacred place, or we want to.
It's a den.
And you give we naturally think of it in sort of animalistic territorial terms, right? This is why are you on my turf? And I see you on my turf, and I know you're here, and that, I know that you don't belong, and why. And so I'm watching, right? Mm-hmm. And these modern urban environments took away that sense. You live on the 14th floor of a thing. You have no sense of your space outside of your front door, right? The hallway doesn't belong to you. And then that built environment needs to have sight lines, really, that allow you to naturally surveil and on your own, not through the police, but just say, like, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Why are you standing on my lawn? And even in public housing, you can create that kind of sense of territoriality just by giving people a way to look out their kitchen window and say, you belong here, you don't, and why? Who are you? Yeah, who are you? And then also the way that good design imparts a feeling of just the security, as you were saying about these housing projects. Everybody's door facing in created an insecure feeling rather than a secure one.
Right.
Whereas facing out, now you felt like you could see the world, you had a citadel.
Yeah.
And then the surrounding environment, in the sense of it being the whole milieu of the, like, where is the shopping center? Where is the police station? Where is the theater? Where is the school? Where you feel like your built environment is part of a larger system that is coherent.
Right.
And it's not just like there's a police station and then block after block after block of
and I think that was a big part of the council and the state problems. They were isolated from that.
Yeah.
They did not feel like they were part of any kind of community with amenities.
And you see that a lot because the original integrationist mentality was like we see now in Seattle. We need to take public housing and disperse it throughout the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Because if you concentrate it, you build these islands where people feel disconnected and insecure because the people around the neighborhoods want their discrete islands that don't have these problems. And Seattle has done a kind of a marvelous job of building public housing that's mixed income, mixed use. So you have, really subsidized apartments and then 3-bedroom homes that are kind of affordable, and then, like nice stores.
I know it must be good policy and it must be working, because when I see the NIMBY objections to these, they're all like, okay, this does sound good, but I've run some numbers and here's why it's not going to be as good as they're promising. Like, you really have to, you get into all these pretty abstruse, not policy arguments, but like implementation details.
This is what city council meetings are really 80% of. I mean, my Uncle Jack, who was mayor of Anchorage in the 70s, when I was running for city council, he said, listen, all local politics is zoning. Everything else is secondary. If you don't understand zoning, you're never going to understand how to be a good mayor of a city. And I was like, zoning. But the more that I interacted with neighborhoods and the town, the more I realized like every square inch of a city is being contested by somebody who wants to either zone it up or zone it down.
I feel like SimCity really gave me a good foundation here.
Is that right?
Because I was like, yeah, of course, zoning. Like somehow I knew that in 11th grade. And then I realized, because of SimCity. That's the only reason I knew it.
Yeah, SimCity. But of course, theorists want to get really down into the nitty gritty, and they start thinking about built spaces in terms of what are the functions of these spaces. Like, well, these are traffic areas and these are rest areas and so forth. And there's also in these sort of mixed housing kind of neighborhoods where you have poor people and middle-class people and wealthy people sort of living side by side, recognizing that all of these different groups have different functions and need different things. Mm-hmm. Like the recommendations of a lot of this kind of urban design, the Oscar Newman school, is like old people actually want to live in high rises. They want a doorman and they don't want to have to care for like their own plumbing and their own gardens. Old people belong there. People that work 60 hours a week also just want to come to an apartment. It's just a place that they're going to crash. But families want a yard, even if it's a small one. Families want a stoop. There are different levels of what people need, depending on what stage of life they are and what they give back to the community. When you are out walking around, you want kids playing stickball in the streets, in the sense that that's actually where you get a safe neighborhood.
Right.
It's when kids are standing, smoking cigarettes at a billiard hall that you get, the dangerous element reading comic books.
Oh, man.
And
Captain Billy's Whiz Bang.
Chewing gum. I mean, all of these terrible, terrible things.
Singapore has fixed all this.
Yes, they have.
No
they
gum,
have made it
no comic books.
100% illegal to do. And then, this all kind of ties into like the broken windows theory of policing, where you recognize that the ownership, these areas like that proprietary feeling of residence breaks down just because things look shabby. Yeah. Like if you've got broken windows in this abandoned factory, it makes you go home with less pride and less willingness to say, hey, quit chewing gum, you kids.
Or why make your part of the neighborhood any better? If everything surrounding is crap.
So once we started seeing this, and this is like proto-urbanism, because urbanism often is...
What's the era here? Like Jane Jacobs is writing in the what? 60s?
60s, and then a lot of this starts to get implemented in the 70s. And you see it in a lot of the things that are built. Things like Cabrini Green were already failing, and a lot of housing projects were failing, but there was no money and there was a lot of institutional memory that made it hard to abandon those spaces. But you started to see, and a lot of this, of course, also ties in with brutalist architecture, which is in some ways arguably alienating. I mean, it was a time of social unrest. And so there were arguments about, well, our college campuses have to be designed in such a way that we can turn the fire hoses on the students if they start burning the university president.
That's the great thing about brutalism is you can do anything you want to the kids and the buildings still look fine. It's like neutron bomb of campus design.
And some of the clearing of crowded urban neighborhoods was about the police being able to get in there and suppress riots.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what happened in the construction of the freeways, which was just like, well, we got to put this freeway somewhere. What about this really vibrant, lower income neighborhood where there are really cool clubs and
they don't have the clout.
Along.
They don't have the clout to annoy politicians.
But a lot of it was much more about like, how do we manage what are now kind of ungainly cities, in enormous sort of migrant populations. And by migrant, I mean just coming from other
Moving around,
states or, coming to work in factories. But by the 80s, there was now a much greater awareness, because there are two schools of thought, right? Do you cut down the trees because the trees are giving criminals a place to hide? Or do you grow trees because leafy trees are what make us safe and, cool summer environment for families? And both schools make compelling arguments. And what's really interesting is this is extremely hard to study, precisely because of the kind of like the initial sort of Jeffrey theory of crime prevention through environmental design, which is the tendrils go into everything. You can't, it's no boulevard of trees is sufficient to build a community. And, you build a great community where everybody takes ownership, and then there's one guy that is a alcoholic that, spits gum everywhere. And then what do you do? Like, how you have to also surrender policing to communities. And this is the argument during the whole defund the police. That mentality is, well, we need to disperse the power of policing to communities.
It's not great that most urban police departments are staffed almost entirely by people who don't live in the city and who would never.
Yeah. And the problem with that, when I was running for city council, I said, why is there no requirement that local police have to live in the city? And it wasn't just an economic argument.
That's part of it.
But it was like, you can't compel city employees.
Is that unconstitutional?
It
can't be a hiring restriction?
Super bad precedent in terms of, now we're compelling people to live certain places, certain ways. And this is, again, it's like an urban renewal kind of concept. And it seems very good to our liberal mind. Like, let's put all the cops in a big building.
Well, I don't have a fix for it, but I just know that the knock-on effects of the current setup is terrible, because it's the equivalent of a population that has no pride in its neighborhood, except it's a bunch of out-of-towners doing the policing who don't care about the neighborhood.
It's true of firemen and ambulance drivers too, right? You get firemen that live out in the suburbs and they come to town and they have a hostile relationship with the poor people that they're charged with rescuing. And partly it is that they get called to all these.
Yeah, they don't see the fun side of that neighborhood.
No, they don't. And they don't see people at their best, right?
They see people ODing.
But by the 80s and by the late 80s, there was much more recognition that, one thing that really helps is like good lighting. One thing that really helps is plantings and certain kinds of fencing and, roads that aren't all straight and featureless. But in the 70s, what that resulted in was a lot of cul-de-sacs, right? The idea of a cul-de-sac and also like streets that are blocked off was, we're going to try and control traffic, and we're going to try and make neighborhoods where kids can play in the streets.
Nobody's going to zoom through it at 50 miles an hour.
But what it then later turned out was, cul-de-sacs just are these dead zones, and there's no flow. And when you cul-de-sac a pre-existing street, usually it's because you don't want people from that side of the cul-de-sac to go on this side of the cul-de-sac.
It's like water. It stagnates if it doesn't flow.
And we see it on Capitol Hill, all those streets that are on West Capitol Hill, there's like a half a dozen streets that have been blocked off halfway.
Yeah.
And it just makes it like weird to drive around up there. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. How did I'm only 2 blocks from where I'm trying to go. Why the hell do we got to go over? So again, those things, and like gating off parks at night. This is very common in the UK. You've surely seen it. All the parks have fence around them. Tall
100%.
Fence.
So and the one thing about that is, in addition to whatever it does with time of day, you can't just wander into the park from any angle. You have to kind of walk around the park 6 blocks until you find a gate.
Right. So
it's hostile architecture to me.
It's
a tourist that wants to go into a park.
It's the beginning of it. And what it initially was trying to do was create safe environments, create local environments. But the ideas, I mean, again, it's a kind of whack-a-mole. Oh, well, these streets are full of strangers, so we're going to try and create streets that are just locals. And now what we've done is create stagnant pools where nobody can, where it's now awkward to get along. The thing about public space is that it really requires that you define what the public is. Because when we look at a bus stop and we see a city go in and say, well, there's a homeless person sitting on or sleeping on this bench, and so we're going to make this bench impossible to sleep on by putting metal bars. Mm. And this is an easy example where a lot of us see this happen.
That's what I imagine when I think of hostile architecture.
Yeah, and you go,
benches you can't sleep on.
Oh, this sucks, because what we've done is we've made this public space impossible for homeless people.
It's worse for everyone, including them.
But the problem is that the people that are using that bus stop and that bench to sit are working class people who are using public transit. And so it's pouring rain and you get 5 people who are taking the bus to their downtown jobs and they show up and there's somebody who's turned it into a house. And so when you think about what our responsibilities are to public space, this is part of the problem of these theories.
Right. There's not one compassionate answer.
Yeah. And as and those of us who are urbanists and educated liberals, we look at hostile architecture and we go, how dare they? What a travesty. But what we're not doing is actually trying to use that bus stop because you're driving by in your spaceship or whatever, your hovercraft.
Yep.
That's full of champagne or non-alcoholic champagne. And so in a sense, hostile architecture is an extension of this era and it's an extension of social engineering through design. But what our social problems are keep changing. In 1969, homelessness was not the issue they were trying to solve, right? It was, I guess, doo-wop. Or whatever. It was, it was stoop life. It was, and then ultimately, violent crime.
Yes.
Now you see all these situations where cities go, well, there are people camping here. There are people using this underpass to light campfires and cook sardines.
And cities don't have the resources to actually solve the underlying problems that created that.
That's right.
They're just trying to deal with the worst symptoms or the symptoms that would get them voted out of office.
And again, we think of it as being rich people imposing a kind of social order on what are the real people of the community. But it's, again, it often comes down to like, well, what are cities for and who are the people using the cities and how many of them are being affected by these situations that are not rich.
You get an eye-opening view when you go into communities and the people talking to the media have kind of what you would think of as kind of alarming views because they're the ones being affected by the crime or whatever. Like suddenly the people in the neighborhood are super hardcore and you're like, hey, come on, man. But
I know.
But like they're the ones that are hearing the gunshots,
It's not our corporate masters necessarily that are putting big spikes where homeless people are sleeping. It's the people agitating for it are the ones that are living downtown in low-income housing often. And they do have a voice. They are noisy. And also a lot of the time, these urban designers and planners are very conscious of the working class. And they're all, because those are the ones that are social engineering. They're not up in the highlands trying to social engineer the Boeings and the Weyerhausers and the Nordstroms that live up in big mansions. They're trying to make a better world in the city, but they can't. It's whack-a-mole. Like, well, how do we do that if there are fentanyl addicts everywhere?
Right. And there's this thing where the effect you're causing seems, in the case of one particular person, it seems like you're creating a problem out of nothing. Like, it's very uncompassionate to tell this one guy he has to get up and not sleep at the bus stop, or that he can't put up a tent under this overpass.
Right.
But in aggregate, you're trying to solve the problem of what were to happen if 50 people were to camp under every underpass. You know, what does that do to the people actually trying to use the city?
And it's very hard to address public housing in our present moment because there are 100 examples of bad public housing and a significantly smaller number of examples of great public housing. And so whenever you go into a city government or design conference kind of environment and you say, you know, it would be great if all the single alcoholic men all lived together where we could treat them all and they could be
coefficient.
And then there's immediately somebody stands up and is like, that sounds like hell. And you go, oh, right. That kind of does sound, there's no way to do that in a way that doesn't actually kind of sound like hell, unless it is build a whole town. And even then it's like, because there are so many solutions to street alcoholics that begin with a kind of moral judgment that you need to be cured. You either need to accept Jesus or you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous or you need to start taking your medication.
Yeah.
And that, it's kind of like making the cops live in the city. It impinges upon some of their...
You can't actually force a citizen to do that.
That's right. It's like, and
the citizen will drink as much as the citizen wants to drink.
And we're living in an era where we're privileging the idea of rights, each individual's rights, over what at different times in history would have been thought of as the collective good, having a greater, the greater authority than to say like, well, each person gets to just, poop their pants as they like.
It is kind of funny that a lot of these seemingly harsh solutions are happening in the most progressive coded places in the world,
Right.
Cities tend to be blue. Blue states tend to have better services for, people who live there or come there. So,
and they're also putting spikes on all the places you could sit down.
And they're the ones. I was in Portland last weekend, and we had the kids and a significant other, so we had rented a little house down in Southeast. And I didn't really know this part of town that well, but I guess just off of Powell Boulevard, there's kind of I assume it used to be a streetcar right of way or something. It's like a 4-lane road, but with a frontage road on it and a big wide media strip between Powell and the frontage road, and then just backyards. Endless Portland.
Kind of as the hills go up there, and it's
And this strip of grass apparently must have been very tempting for people without a place to spend the night, because the city had, I don't know where they had gone, but they had just brought in boulders and had spaced out boulders according to whatever the algorithm told them would keep tents from popping up. And they'd had to chain link off some of the boulders. So now you have an ugly field of grass with boulders that is also, and they're these narrow rectangles. So you've got these fenced off areas that are no more than 8 feet wide in some cases. And the people who lived there, the unhoused people, had just set up their tents between the boulders. Because what are you going to do? I mean, you get 4 guys together and roll a boulder over. Maybe that's enough effort that the whack-a-mole will go somewhere else.
Well, these cities on the West Coast are kind of famously test cases for all of this kind, and in Europe especially, right? Some of the hostile architecture that we are trained to see are like these park benches. Europe keeps inventing new ways to make windowsills sloped just enough that nobody wants to sit there. A lot of public transit and environments where you kind of do need benches.
But the benches are no longer comfy.
You can't sit on them. Right. They're places to lean.
If your feet are tired, you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, if you're elderly and you just want to rest, there are these things called simi seats, which are kind of just little chairs that are fastened to poles that are at bus stops. There are, all kinds of these spiky places, but also we're all familiar with the little metal blocks that keep kids from skateboarding.
Down the escalator thing?
Yeah, well, the escalators to keep kids from sliding,
Right.
which I
Right.
used to love to do, slide down escalators. But no, like anywhere in a public space where skateboarders would hop up and kind of rail slide, they now often have little grommets that keep you from doing
Is
it.
that enough of a problem? Were the however number of skateboarders there were a day really keeping people from enjoying those stairs?
What's interesting about skateboarding is that it does wear concrete.
Damages the stairs.
And so in brutalist environments, especially where the idea of the concrete is like this squared off and it's its own aesthetic.
Yeah. The corners must be
The
sharp.
corners are all worn down. The concrete's broken.
Clearly,
But
you solve this with a skateboard tax.
also, skateboarding is disruptive because it's noisy. And you're walking through with your briefcase, and there are all these kids, teenagers.
Because if I live next door, maybe I'm more invested in the skateboarding noise at not 10 o'clock.
That like whack, whack of skateboarding is, and especially in an urban area where it's echoing around the concrete.
The sound of people not doing a trick. The sound of people attempting a trick
and not
and
landing
failing.
it. But there's, the counter argument is skateboarders are not the urban poor. Skateboarders are often middle-class kids that come into town to skate. Like skating is not what poor people use to get around.
Right.
Right? It's what
Don't
kind of-
design cities around skating.
yeah, it's generally what privileged kids, like nobody's out.
Just build them a park.
Exactly, and there are now skate parks, but like inline skating isn't something that people that are working in hotels as cleaning people are using to get around. So this idea that hostile architecture is universally like anti-civil and directed entirely at the poor isn't. There are so
Right.
many layers of like, actually it serves the poor in a lot of cases. And often
In some ways.
it isn't just homeless people that are being targeted. It's like the old pee reflectors. Yes, you don't want homeless people peeing on the wall, but you also don't want like rich drunk bros peeing on your wall either.
I'd get madder about the second one, quite honestly.
Rich drunk bros are in some cases the real problem.
They could have peed at the bar.
But one of the results of this pushback from liberals that are smart enough to be educated about urban architecture or urban hostile architecture is what's happening now, which is the best hostile architecture is invisible to liberals.
They've got the Rowdy Piper glasses so the liberals can't see it.
So these boulders,
They just put Tucker Carlson ads on it or something
this concept of putting boulders down
Right.
is meant to conceal it.
because it looks natural.
It looks natural.
Look at this park we've created.
And so
I had never seen it before.
yeah, and it's a novel idea. Here in Seattle, just during the pandemic, that bridge on Western that's by El Centro, down, it's Western kind of in Belltown. There's that bridge as you come out of the market and you go down. It's a
Yes.
big, and that used to be an area where people
Yeah,
were
there
putting
are
up
tents
tents.
along the
And
underpass.
what Seattle did was go in there and put bike racks. Well, to a Seattle eye,
A progressive
cool,
solution.
cool, bike racks,
Yeah.
awesome. But then,
Not me. I'm from the east side and I hate the war on cars.
well, no, what happened was enough people who are attuned to this were like, nobody's locking their bike
Yeah,
up
who are you? Who is biking to here?
by El Centro del Raza on Western. Like it's not anywhere you would park. And you're seeing it a lot. Seattle also went into a place where a bunch of RVs had been parked and it was essentially a homeless community. And they put in a bike lane that just coincidentally, like completely wiped out what had been one of those, somewhat terrible RV communities, but it was a bike lane from nowhere to nowhere. They were using what we're coded to think of as a good urbanist project.
It's like greenwashing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Oh, we're going
we're
to
going to look like we're doing.
but it was absolutely a measure to take away the homeless situation down there because we have a big event coming up, a big sporting event
You
this
and me?
year.
The World Cup.
Yeah, the World Cup. And
I thought you meant you and I had a big event coming up.
you and I every day have a new
and
sporting
we tell
event.
SPD to move the unhoused people.
So there are things like sprinklers that come on only at night, intermittent sprinklers in doorways and stuff that you and I maybe wouldn't be aware of, but somebody sleeping in that doorway would sure be aware of it.
Have you heard about because old people's ears are worse, you can like produce a tone from a convenience store that only young people can hear, and you can keep down on the loitering teens.
So that device is called the Mosquito, and it was invented in 2008, and it has two modes. One of them is it produces a sound that everybody can hear, but its most effective mode is it produces this tone at 17 kilohertz. That, if you're older than...
Yeah, we've been playing it this whole episode and none of you heard it. So what does that say, omnibus listeners?
But your kids and your dogs have been hating
your
it.
Kids are going to hate it.
And it was invented by a Welshman by the name of Howard Stapleton. So you and I have some complicity in this.
As Welsh people?
Yeah.
As Welsh Americans.
As Welsh Americans.
Sorry, we apologize.
But you remember that McDonald's down on 3rd Avenue used to play country music really loud?
Oh, yeah, I noticed... I think it still does that. The other night I walked by and that was going on.
Because it was an area, where there was a lot of people congregating on the sidewalk, and they were certainly concerned about it as a drug marketplace or as a symptom of urban decline. And so, there you walk past there and it's just like, oh yeah, derp, 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 and and a bunch of black kids sitting under it like, thanks, man, love it. But
I do wonder how much of this is. I totally understand that cities don't have the resources to actually address these problems. So you can't get mad every time they fight a symptom. What other weapon do they have? Sometimes
people are yelling at them all the
choices.
time.
And they're going to get voted out because homelessness is on the rise through no fault of any particular elected official, but just because of like global systemic things, and we have mild climate and all the rest. But I do think it is a moral failing in the average person to feel like, I'm not homeless, but I had to look at it today. And therefore, this is something that happened to me. Well, I'm the true victim of having to see something unsightly or unpleasant in my city.
It's true, but it's because we're thinking of it in terms of we had to see it, but other people have to live it. And I'm not talking about the homeless that are living it. I'm talking about the people that are going to work there.
And I guess you're right that like if what's important is a general sense of ownership, if that's important to create urban environments that work, then, I guess that's a silver lining of people being like, I saw the poor and some of them might do crime.
Right.
Is, at least that shows a person who's like, has a sense of community, the territoriality you talk about.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's the best way to express it.
But the people that are like on their way to work and have to wend through absolute, what seems like to them a war zone, have a much greater investment in like the territoriality of this place. Like it's very hard for me to feel.
I can't speak as the working poor, but I do have to say I've spent a lot of time, hanging out with my kids and my dogs in many a Seattle park, only to come home and find that the internet is telling me that these places are unlivable war zones. And why have we given up the fight? And I'm like, dude, I walked Green Lake 6 times last month.
Is Green Lake one of the unlivable war zones? I didn't realize that.
I think if you're on the right next part of next door.
I hear 3rd and Pine a lot, and I can confirm that you wouldn't want to take your kids to 3rd and Pine.
My son's significant other works at a place down there, and it's colorful.
It's pretty tough.
And if I'm not a young woman, I don't have the experience of what it's like to work on that block.
That's right too. Unfortunately, what we lose, as kind of what you're implying, is also the urban amenities that actually make a city livable for everybody, including public restrooms, places to sit. Like in taking those away in order to keep them from being, public restrooms were used for public sex and for drugs and so forth. So it was like, these self-cleaning bathrooms, we have to get rid of them now. And now we're back to, there's no place to pee.
There are no bathrooms.
What's interesting is that within urbanism, there's now a movement called basically, it varies in terminology, but tactical urbanism, where if you have a sense of how you want built environments to reflect our natural tendency to want this benign territoriality or this sense of ownership, that you go and actually build, kind of handcraft things that are very specific to time and place. If there's a spot where there's no sign directing, which way does this path lead?
Oh.
Make a sign and put it there.
Famous case on the freeway, on the LA freeway in the 2000s of some famously confusing exit. Some local tactical urbanist, I guess, just made a replica sign and it stayed there for years. And nobody noticed because it was such a good replica of actual interstate signage.
There's a thing called chair bombing where there's a park with nowhere to sit and a bunch of young people just go buy a bunch of chairs at Home Depot or buy a bunch of chairs at a thrift store and go out and in the middle of the night just put 40 chairs.
You don't have to saw the things off the benches.
That's right.
You just have to go to IKEA.
Just go to IKEA and buy some chairs. In a way, during the pandemic, all those restaurants that built patios out into the parking spaces, parklets, they got that approved by the city, but only after it was kind of like a tactical urbanism. Like, let's actually start just taking over this space.
Enough places were doing it that people could see this is actually a good.
Right. Pop-up retail is another way of like, well, this is an abandoned storefront, and we're gonna actually have sort of like a store that couldn't afford to rent this. We'll have it be there for a couple of months and activate that space.
Food trucks in parking lots.
And food trucks are a big part of it. Turning what were just dead zones into very lively and very active zones. And you love the city of Portland as much as you hate all of Canada and all of Australia. You love Portland.
I love Canada and Australia, but I might love Portland a little more. It's closer, and it has so much better food than Seattle does.
I know. Fortunately for me, I just eat at Pizza Hut every day, so I'm not affected.
The neighborhood where we stayed near the anti-homeless Boulder deployment had a little food truck pot at the end in what used to be a weird triangular-shaped parking lot that was maybe just overflow from a muffler store at one point. And we were like, oh, cute, a food pod. And then we came home the following night. It was a Friday night, and we could not park on our street. And there was a live band playing.
And you're like, well.
The vibe was like kind of amazing.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, like the band did not play until 11 o'clock, and I'm okay with it being harder to park. I'm not the worst NIMBY in the world. I'm just top
because
10%.
You're coming through, right? The people that live there might feel a little differently about the 11 o'clock band.
Maybe they're happy to have.
They could be.
Maybe they're very happy to have a fun little brewery and taco thing appearing next door.
I definitely think the ones that have tattooed sideburns probably think it's pretty great.
The houses that had little free libraries in front of them.
I bet they thought it was great.
They were all for it.
Yeah, I bet the little old lady that's lived there since the 40s has a different feeling about it. But this kind of tactical urbanism seems to be for now because it is based on kind of local, low risk, short term solutions.
It's not top down.
And they're not trying to go. Yeah, that's right. They're not trying to get $1 billion investment in the city because you're also seeing Seattle try to control traffic for a long time by just trying to make it really lame to drive in the city. Like, we're just going to make it harder so that you stop doing it.
I'm not against that, honestly, even though I'm the victim of it.
It would be better if they had already had all of the transit infrastructure that would let you leave your car behind. But they're doing it the other way around, like make it lame to drive, and then people will vote for transit, which is,
that's the only weapon you got.
Yeah, that's an argument that you can make. But for sure, this like recapturing, I did it right over here. There was a path that had a concrete blockade keeping you from being able to drive a car or a motorcycle through the area, and it created a kind of cul-de-sac. And it was a dirt trail that kind of went through the forest that would have for sure been a road or motorcycles. But the problem was it was overgrown to such a degree that if you were a kid on a bicycle, you couldn't You had to get off your bike. You couldn't go through this. You had to, and it was one of these like really tight little.
You can get a bike through there. The concrete barrier is just anti-car.
It's anti-car, but you have to get off and walk your bike because you can't go straight through it. You have to turn it. And a lot of hostile architecture is this kind of thing. Like,
can we make it a little annoying?
Yeah, they would make. You see this in cities all the time where there's a garbage can, but the aperture is really small, so you can't go and put a garbage bag in there. Yeah. You can only put individual garbage, and you don't think of that as hostile architecture. But if you're looking for a place to put more than a can, it ends up being. And so I went there in the middle of the night with a pair of clippers.
You better watch out. You're on the record now.
And there was a holly tree on one side, and I just clipped the low branches so you could ride your bike around it. And at first,
since then, has this become a vibrant neighborhood center and a bike thoroughfare?
What's crazy is that's the main path now. And when I first did it, it was ivy on the ground. I didn't do anything else. I just took the branches down. But kids discovered it, and then kids started to use it, and now, it's the path.
Thanks, Mr. Roderick.
That's right. And I didn't take any credit.
No problem, kids. It's tactical urbanism.
I didn't put up a sign that said that was my Eagle Scout project. I saw a need and I tactically urbanized it.
Hero. And that concludes Hostile Architecture. Entry 601.PR2907. Certificate number 19421 in the omnibus. Speaking of hostile places, social medias, with rare exceptions, pretty much a nightmare now. We don't endorse it in any way. But if you already have to be there for some reason, we're not going to be a NIMBY about it and kick you out. In fact, you can find us at Omnibus Project, at Ken Jennings, at John Roderick, at various places. Email us your policy suggestions at theomnibusproject@gmail.com.
Let us know, are you a Rousseauian or a Kantian thinker about the social compact?
Do you think it's Rousseauian? I like when they put in a V. Rousseauvian.
Oh, Rousseauvian. I don't know if I've ever heard that.
Like Thoreauvian. Just because I guess it's thought to be awkward to end with a vowel.
Rousseauvian.
Because Rousseau, you'd have E-A-U-I-A. That's a mouthful to have those
that is
5 vowels in a row.
That is Rousseauvian.
I don't know why V became... and you can say Rousseauvian.
Yeah, I would.
You can... Why not?
Rousseauvian.
Who's going to stop you?
Thoreauvian.
Tactical consonant deployment. If you want to mail us things, please do. P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155. For example, I just learned the word dissectologist from...
What the heck? Dissectologist?
Now I don't have a name. Where's the box?
It wouldn't be dissectologist?
Oh, it's Sharon from North Dakota.
Oh, hi, Sharon.
But I opened this not knowing, because Sharon believes I'm not sufficiently celebratory.
South Dakota.
Of North Dakota, of the many attractions of North Dakota.
Oh, right. But she lives in South Dakota.
No, she lives in North Dakota.
Oh, I see. North Dakota.
Did I say South? Sharon from North Dakota. So I was worried that she would be sending
some
anthrax from Grand Forks.
Yeah.
But instead, she just wants us to have this because we are... Do you know what a dissectologist is? Apparently, it is somebody who enjoys jigsaw puzzles.
Oh, hey, I like that. Am I a dissectologist?
And she sent us Butts on Things.
Oh.
Which is a puzzle in which all the things pictured here, mostly edible items, which is a little disturbing. A snow cone.
Like cakes.
A caramel apple, a cupcake, a gumball machine, all have butts on them. Which of these foods would you enjoy more if it had a butt?
A cupcake butt or a donut butt?
An ice cream sandwich with a butt is kind of fun. I don't want a candy corn with a butt.
How do you feel about donuts?
I love donuts.
Okay.
But I've never thought, I wish this had a butt.
No, I don't want to eat any butts. That's been one of my core principles since I was a teen.
Well, the culture has changed.
No butts.
The culture has changed on you when it comes to eating butts.
It really has.
Also, Sharon, not as into North Dakota as you'd think, because the card is celebrates the loons of Minnesota.
Well, she might be. I think she is. We've talked about it, right? She is in eastern
Grand
North
Forks
Dakota.
would be pretty close to the border. Am I picturing this right?
So she's
Still, I feel like she
sees
should
those
represent.
Minnesota
I
loons.
feel like she should represent by celebrating her own state's loons. How far from the border is? Yeah, it's like right there.
Yeah,
She for sure goes into Minnesota like to go to Costco.
she does all the time.
And what else do we have here? Speaking of tactical urbanism, the Center for Land Use Interpretation in Culver City, California, which I recommend even though I still haven't been there,
Love it.
wants us to know that their new exhibit, An Hour of Earth from Above, Landsat Imagery, opened in April. Free admission, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Go check it out if you happen to be in LA. The Center for Land Use Interpretation, we are still on their mailing list for some reason, possibly because I keep
Sending them money.
I haven't yet. I should,
Yeah,
but I keep plugging their exhibits instead because
that's
that's a different kind of currency.
yeah, it's a kind of, since you're the Joe Rogan of liberal podcast.
It doesn't cost me a cent.
That's right.
Why wouldn't I? And what else do we have here? I guess there's this.
That's quite a stack of this.
Ben from Steamboat Spring. Well, we get this postcard from Svalbard. Oh, it's the Italia. It's the Zeppelin we did an omnibus about. And apparently Chris and Andy must listen to the show because they visited the world's northernmost permanent settlement. They skied across the Brugge Peninsula to get to Svalbard.
That's cool.
Or to get to this part of Svalbard.
Did they also blow up a heavy water factory?
That's right. They're in the pre-credit scene of a James Bond movie right now. Hopefully this card is not contaminated with an ancient virus from a melting glacier. Now I'm worried.
Oh boy.
Although I guess if Sharon from North Dakota didn't do bioterrorism,
Why would these people?
why would the Norwegians?
What does that have to do with Steamboat Springs, Colorado?
Sorry, that was a different one. I was reading this first because Steamboat Springs, Colorado actually, Ben sent us one note about elves on shelves, saying there is no industry whose incredibly fraudulent awards are more common. We must have been talking about the toy awards. I don't know what we were talking about.
Are you sure he's not talking about the Crime Prevention through Environmental Design Association?
Oh, have you won one of those?
Let me tell you this.
Do you want a crimey?
If you go to the Crime Prevention through Environmental Design Association or SEPTED.
Septed, that's not good.
If you look at their website, it is 100% the best 1999 website you can find. It's so rad.
No redesign.
And they just had a convention like in Palm Springs like 2 weeks ago that I missed.
He says the wine and spirits industry is the worst.
Oh yeah.
Our local Colorado neighbors 291 whiskey is generally reviled as astringent to the point of being nearly unpalatable, yet their bottle is covered with enough metals to make Idi Amin blush.
Wow. Nice analogy.
I don't remember how that came up in Elves on Shelves, but I'll take his word for it. In the singular episode of Shark Tank I have ever watched, a guest was pitching the sharks on his Jewish version, and then it's a very funny pun that I can't read because of the post office stamp has crossed it.
Oh, boo.
It begins with mensch. Mensch on a bench. Oh, it's elf on a shelf. They had mensch on a bench for Hanukkah kids. I'd get mensch on a bench. And then this also appears to be Ben from Steamboat. He sent you a 16 postcard
Shaggy Dog Story?
Postcard journey. These are all boats of Puget Sound, and then it winds up with a big Bainbridge Island postcard that has a fish wearing a hat. That's the symbol of Bainbridge, a fish with a hat.
Why would it only be for me?
Well, it just says John Roderick, care of Kenner Mindy Jennings, probably Omnibus Project. So I hope you have some time tonight to read a 16 postcard correspondence.
All I have is time.
I don't want to give you any spoilers, but he begins, this letter is about ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. So there you go.
There you go. As you and I noted earlier today, It's marvelous to know about our neuro spiciness, but banks still close at 5.
You don't want to say that to 100% of our listeners who are on the spectrum.
Right, or who work in banks, or both.
And want to get off early. They don't want to stay late. You can find other Futurelings online at various Facebook groups. There's a Discord. There's a subreddit. There's all of the above. But if you're going to just make one stop on the internet today to enrich your omnibus-centric life, I personally, because I profit by it, would recommend patreon.com/omnibusproject, where you can just take your love of all things omnibus to another level. Mostly because if you were to give just a mere $5 a month, John,
it's hardly anything. It's a pittance.
Change from your couch, basically. You would get access to almost 70 new omnibus entries immediately because we've been doing a monthly addenda show for the Patreon, and early ad-free access to all new shows.
You couldn't even buy a single chair to chair bomb a parklet.
We've been doing hostile architecture and omnibus. Like, I instruct our editor to put really annoying, what do you call those kind of ads? The kind we don't read. Dynamic advertising.
Dynamic advertising.
Please interrupt me in the middle of sentences. When John's telling a really good story, please drop in 6 minutes of fast food advertising.
Penal enhancement.
Yeah, penile enhancement, maybe really weird conservative coded stuff for our more progressive listeners, and vice versa for the conservative ones.
You know, the Germans didn't want to use the mosquito, probably because they have much better hearing. And so
do they?
I don't know.
I didn't know this.
I'm sure they think they do. The S-Bahn proposed their version of hostile sound architecture was going to be that they played atonal music.
I thought you were going to say podcast ads.
No, it should be.
They play Schoenberg.
Well, it's kind of a form of atonal music, podcast ads. Atonal music, and then I think that's
their country music.
Cruel and unusual punishment.
They could put in oompa music. That's their country music, right?
Boom, 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 boom.
No, we do not put in ads just to annoy you. The ads help pay the bills around here, but the cost of being unannoyed by the ads is so much cheaper than
annoyed by the ads.
Going to IKEA and buying yourself a bus stop chair.
Yeah, those ads are living rent free in your head. So just pay $5 a month rent.
Just pay a very minimal amount, a nominal rent amount, and you will have no ads at all. Patreon.com/omnibusproject. You won't regret it. Sign up today. You won't regret it. And then you'll forget about us, and we'll just get $5 a month from you, and you won't even notice. It'll be completely painless.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus. Oh, also, we wish you many goods and cheese.